How are you?
Good. This is so fun.
We'll wait about one more minute and get started. All right, I have 12:01. So we'll go ahead and get started with today's session of our Research Wednesdays development series. Wanted to let you know about our two upcoming sessions for the balance of this semester. On October 27th, we're going to be have a couple of speakers from statistics and from data science to talk about statistics resources available at KSU for your research. If you're like me, you can do statistics, but there's a point where I reach the end of my comfort level, and I am happy to hand it off to the experts. So we wanted to share with everyone, particularly in Wellstar College, related to biostats and some of the work we do here, what we have available at KSU to help with that. And then on November 10th, we'll have a couple of guest presenters from the library who will be talking about knowledge translation, altmetrics, what to do to expand the impact of your research after you have had your journal manuscript or your abstract published, what to do as the next steps beyond that to make sure it gets the visibility and impact that we all hope it will. And one other announcement before we start on today's Research Wednesday topic. We have kind of breaking news for those of you from Wellstar College. Look out soon for an announcement about an internal seed grant mechanism. We heard from faculty that it would be really helpful if there was a mechanism outside of the overall Office of Research's sort of one-time cycle for seed grants, that we could do something on a more rolling basis internally. And the dean has identified some available funds. We also have something that's really cool if you do any survey-based research. We have a contract with Qualtrics, who's the same company that does the surveys that we have a site license for on campus. But you can actually identify a target demographic or condition or job category, whatever it is you're researching. You can specify a desired sample size. You can provide a survey, and Qualtrics will go do the work for you. They will find the people for you. They will administer the survey, and they'll say, here are your data sets. And that's kind of amazing. It is a fee for service kind of thing. So the cost depends on, I mean, you can't ask for 6 million of a certain demographic, but we will work with you to set up something that we may be able to support through funds the dean has identified in the college. So excited about all that's coming and the progress we're making towards supporting research in our college. And want to dive right into today's topic. This one's a little different from the others. This is sort of research development, but also launching a tool that will be available to us in the college, and potentially a model for other colleges as well, to work on our writing, to make sure that everything that we submit, whether it is a manuscript, grant proposal, conference abstract, is in the best shape it can possibly be before it leaves us. And so we're establishing today a critical friends network in the college. So the talk today will be, I think, fairly brief. We'll talk about what is a Critical Friends Network and how it will work for us and how we'll operationalize this in Wellstar College. And then most of you are probably already really good at this, but we'll go over some core concepts for constructive criticism. What does it mean to be a critical friend? To be friendly, but also provide the feedback that we all need to improve our work. And then we'll run through a little example case related to an NIH proposal and the sort of feedback and where that feedback can fall into different categories. So, critical friends groups are a real thing that's been around a long time. The concept was started actually out of school reform. So in the Annenberg Institute at Brown University, they set up this process for critically analyzing what people were doing in schools and setting up a network to be able to improve it with internal and external feedback. So that process is that Critical Friends Group is actually a registered trademark from something called the National School Reform Faculty Organization, and it's used by thousands and thousands of folks all around the country. So we're like many, we're borrowing the concept, and so a lot of people have been borrowing this concept and relating it to things like groups for review. If you're like me, you might have noticed there's a typo on this slide, and that was intentional. That's kind of the point here. If you noticed that, it probably bugged you. And when we submit our writing out into the world, we don't want to bug people. We want them to focus on our ideas, our writing. We don't want them to say, you completely missed something. You must be lacking in preparation or working on a tight deadline or not caring enough about the details. And whether any of those are true or not, we don't want to ever leave that impression. So what we, in our professional lives as researchers, what we write is what people know about us. Very few people will see you present at a conference compared to the people you can reach with your writing. So we want to use a network like this to present our best selves to the world. The other thing is what we write stays out there forever. I have journal articles with typos in them that I didn't catch, that none of the reviewers caught, that none of the editors caught. And I'm like, please no one look at that. And we don't ever want to say that about our own writing. So, moving on, in Wellstar College, the idea is we'll have an identified network of internal reviewers. They will be our peers, our colleagues, our friends for everything we write: conference abstracts, manuscripts, journal articles, grant proposals, book chapters, entire books. You know, you may need to buy somebody a drink for that one, but what we write can be reviewed in any form by this network. Everyone in the network will be committed to timely and constructive feedback, and we'll use kind of that model of the little box at the register at the service station, the leave a penny, take a penny, back when we used to use cash and when pennies were a thing. When you submit something, some of your writing, and people review for you, you're then committing to review for others. So it's a bank deposit kind of model where when you withdraw from others, you commit to depositing for others. It may not be the same people, but it will be part of the entire network. And if we create kind of a broad network and share the load on this, then it stands better chance for success. The actual structure will be on MS Teams with also an email list. I like Teams. I like what it can do, but I know I've had Teams where I have completely missed activity because it doesn't ping me all the time in the way that I can see the pings and the little notices go away and I don't go look. So we will use Teams for file sharing, posting of the writing and reviews, working out the structure and organization, but we'll also have an email list that says there is a new article available for review. Hop over to Teams to have a look, just so we all know we're getting notifications in two ways. The person who is posting the writing can set the deadline. If you're writing a grant proposal and you have a deadline in a coming up and you have a schedule where you need to move on in 2 weeks, you set a deadline for 2 weeks. Just being aware that the longer time you provide, the better your chances of receiving reviews. And if your deadline's too tight, you might just not get any. So keeping that in mind. The writing that you post should meet basic English language standards. This is not a process for basic copy editing, and some of that is available through the Office of Research. I know Amanda's on the call. I don't want to, you've mentioned that the Office of Research can do this before. I don't know if it's general copy editing or beyond that, so she can help with that as well. The reviews we conduct will be done in typically in Word using track changes. If you are a print and scribble all over the page, you can do that too. Just use good handwriting, and you can just scan that and upload it if that's easier. If multiple people are reviewing for their friends, it's not a combined thing. We're not using a Google Docs or a SharePoint where everyone's reviewing the same thing, because you get swayed by others, and we want the point of this is fresh eyes. So everyone will give their own fresh eyes to it as they go. And the Associate Dean for Research, whoever's in my position in the college, since I'm on an interim right now, will monitor the bank. We'll keep an eye on who's depositing and who's withdrawing, and make sure no one is over withdrawn their account, and make sure we're sharing the load. The purposes of the process are to get outside eyes on your work. When you are writing something, you know how entrenched you can be in it, and how you can sometimes miss the forest for the trees. You can miss details that need to be there, and just along the way through 9 iterations and drafts, you might have left something out, or something got deleted or changed. And so these outside eyes will be within our college, so they're not too far outside. We're not recruiting from engineering or the humanities. We're recruiting from the Wellstar College, so people will be aware of probably the general scope of your work. They are looking for general readability. They're looking for how you are communicating basic concepts and main points. They will help with typos and clarity, and general overview of scientific methods and scientific rigor, but don't expect discipline-specific accuracy. Don't expect someone to give a thorough review of whether your statistical methods are appropriate or not. That's not the purpose of this Critical Friends network. The actual Critical Friends groups have some principles that they use, and I want to borrow some of them because I like these. They fit the process, and these are instructive to anyone about being a good colleague when you're helping your colleagues out. Make a commitment of time and energy into the process. We are all super busy people, but we also owe it to each other to carve out some dedicated time for these reviews. A cursory review it may catch a few things, but it's not the level of help that we're hoping for in this process. As the person receiving feedback, this is hard. It's hard for others to criticize your work. It's hard not to take it personally. It is hard not to, goodness, you get that first manuscript review and it's a rejection or a major revision, and it's just a bummer for at least a weekend, for some people longer. But be reflective and open to input from the group members. These are critics, but they are also our friends, and we work together and we know each other, and that's an important part. And in that same mindset, we develop trust in each other, respect and personal regard for fellow group members. So this should go without saying, but feedback should have that in mind, that we are all friends and we're trying to help each other in this process. And the last point, and these are straight from this Critical Friends group, recognize the competence and expertise that each group member brings to the process. There's a natural reaction when you receive critique to say, oh, did they even read it? And you say, I put that on page 9. How did they miss it? And why did they leave a comment? Well, if you take a step back, maybe you didn't communicate it as clearly as you could have, and maybe you can use that feedback to say, if I just move it up to page 2, that might solve this issue. And so understanding that we are all professionals and that we are giving professional advice is helpful. I want to add some of my own that aren't part of the Critical Friends group. As you're doing these reviews, I think it's helpful. You get really critical. I think it's helpful to point out the strengths as well. And we really often miss this. If something is really resonating with you and you think it's handled very well, make a note. Someone else reviewing may have sort of been a little dismissive, so it's helpful to the writer to know that at least one person thinks that's a really powerful part of what you're communicating. And it just feels good to get some positives when everything else might be negative. I like to remember the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In this case, review for others like you would want them to be reviewing for you. And if you're reviewing a proposal, think like a reviewer. The audience of grant proposals is a study section. It is a panel of reviewers, and you should have that mindset. It's about communication and expression of ideas, but it is also about someone making a decision whether they're going to fund something. So try to put that hat on when you're reviewing. And mutually, writer and reviewer recognize that scope of review and understand who's reviewing it. They may not have discipline knowledge. And for something like a journal, they may not have the knowledge of the audience of the journal. So there may be things that you don't need to necessarily communicate, but they just might not understand them, and that's fine. So we recognize that. So last thing for today is I want to run through an example, and I think this might be helpful just if you haven't done a lot of these types of reviews to see how this can sometimes work. So I very recently, as in I finished this morning, reviewed an NIH research strategy section for a colleague here in Wellstar College. And I'm happy to do these as well, but this process will help a lot of other people do it. This would be considered a fairly large deposit into the Critical Friends Network. It was 15 pages, 8,700 words or so. These are fairly dense, but they're super, super important. This one was a product of a program called our Summer Research Fellows, which is organized by the Office of Research. It's an intensive grant writing process over the summer with a cohort of other writers and an established team of mentors. So we expect these to be in really good shape when they come out of that process. So, and this was an outstanding proposal that I was just reviewing. But again, when you work on something like that intensely over a summer, you can miss some really big points, and they are not things that are necessarily critical to the idea. They're just things that'll throw a reviewer off, and we don't ever want to throw a reviewer off. So I want to run through just some of the critique that I provided for this proposal, and you can see if you have anything else to add. So this is the very start of the research design section. So a research strategy will have a section on significance, a little bit of background, some innovation, and then you get into here's the study. So while I'm talking, you can be reading through this just to get an idea of how it looks. You may be reading something like this and you don't know what a skeletal muscle microbiopsy is, and you haven't seen anything with neuromuscular testing, and so you're already kind of behind, and you don't have the expertise that the panel would have. But you can still provide really helpful feedback. So this is, as you can see on the first line, a randomized clinical trial with males and females in a step reduction intervention. Now, you didn't read the significance, so you don't know what that means, but as a reviewer, I had gotten to this point and I was already familiar with what the intervention was. I thought it was communicated really well. The first feedback I gave was in formatting and readability. I think pictures are really, really important. And when I'm reviewing manuscripts and grant proposals, I just naturally find myself looking at the pictures first. It's like a children's book almost. And I love this picture, but the font is really tiny. So my first feedback I gave was about readability and formatting. I was saying, you've got a lot of space there. You could probably move the legend over to one side and increase the font size and use the entire width of the page a little better. Sometimes that's limited by just the length you have. Manuscripts have word count maximums and abstracts do, and you've looked for every single word you can possibly delete. But I think there's space here to just improve that a little. And your review can include what I call here hardcore grammar snobbery. If you are, I'm a bit of a grammar pedant, and I know none of you will be my friend anymore, but this first line here is technically grammatically incorrect. It should not be comprised of, it should be composed of, or consist of, or include. So that's good feedback. I think it's snobbery, and maybe no other reviewer cares but me. But if you see things that are grammatically incorrect, point them out. And if possible, whenever you point something like that out, suggest an alternative. There are times where we'll just say reword or this sounds awkward, but if you can actually suggest an alternative, that's going the extra mile to be extra helpful. You can go super hardcore grammar snobbery and put the link to the little grammar lesson if you really want to be annoying, but I wouldn't do that. I just did it as a bit of a joke. So, but that's how you learn about comprise versus compose. Very common error. And if you can, address the science. That's why we're doing this within a college. My question when I read this was, I read randomized clinical trial, and then I read two groups of adults, a male and female cohort, and that didn't sound like an RCT to me. And an RCT, typically there's either a control population or there are two different interventions, and you randomize people into an intervention cohort. You can't randomize people into a male or female cohort. So I think the sex in this is a main effect, and it's not what we typically think of in an RCT. So I'm suspecting that this might have been an RCT at some point, and we change our minds, we change our ideas about a project, and sometimes we leave things like that and we just miss them. And so in this case, I've already reached out to the author and said, I don't think this is an RCT. And he said, oh my gosh, you're right. And that's a tiny little thing, but it's in like 9 places in the proposal. So it's a thing that is glaring, that is just a simple omission or a simple little mistake. But imagine, that guy I showed earlier with the shrugged shoulders. Imagine a reviewer. They see RCT, they get into I am reviewing an RCT, and they start to see, well, what's being randomized? Where's the is this intention to treat model? Where's and none of that needs to be here because it's a clinical trial, but it's not a randomized clinical trial into cohorts. So that sort of scientific feedback can be incredibly valuable and can literally save a proposal, because this is the sort of thing, it's a simple mistake, but it can derail the entire proposal from the point that's read in the specific aims to the point that it gets triaged. So again, you are not required to be a subject matter expert, but it's really helpful if you can offer general scientific review like this. And I mentioned, it's nice to give kudos too. It's nice that not all of your critical friendly review is negative. I thought the author of this proposal did an excellent job here pointing out the importance of the previous literature while also setting up the gap in the previous literature. You see a bunch of names listed here, and it says this work, this current knowledge has been critical in identifying these mechanisms. And then a whole bunch of authors are listed. Those authors could be on your review panel. They could be, if it's a manuscript, they could be assigned to review the manuscript. They could be on the study section. If you validate their work, that's a good thing, and that's hard to do. So I thought the author did this really well, and I loved how this was written. So I just wanted to point that out. And you can find typos. Like I said, I'm pedantic in my reviews. I circle every single stinking typo on the page when I'm reviewing stuff, and I don't put it all in my review unless it's a journal article. And journals are terrible about copy editing now. Even super expensive open access journals will not provide any copy editing. They print whatever the reviewers are okay with, and that's inexcusable to me. But if you see typos, by all means point them out, because those are the things that anything that irks a reviewer or might wind up published and irk a reader is avoidable. And so this is our opportunity to avoid that. So this is a little rationale for specific aim 3 and a little experimental methods. So here's my review of it. I found that's good, Allison. I found one little typo here, so I just did the track changes and added an S. There were maybe 4 of those in this entire proposal. So like I said, this one was really well done. But if you see them, point them out. And if multiple people are reviewing, hopefully we'll catch them all. I made a little note that the author said we will use a widely used short physical performance battery. If that's something that's validated for this population, that's more powerful than to say it's widely used. So that's a little suggestion you can make. And then you can ask questions. And you remember I said if you're reviewing a proposal, put your reviewer hat on. So at the end here, there is a little sentence about all these walking tests. And reviewers love to say there's not enough detail. And you know, when you're doing a research manuscript, someone's supposed to be able to replicate your study. In a grant proposal, the bar is even higher because it's not being replicated, you're making it up. So reviewers love to say there wasn't enough detail about this, and you can't provide detail about everything. But if you see something and you wish there was more detail, point it out. I asked for some details on how many trials, is the order randomized, what are the actual data outcomes? And if there's room, that's a thing that the author can kind of try to sneak in as they have space, because if you thought it was important to add that, then a potential reviewer probably thinks it's important too. Last thing I'll mention is I decided, don't always do this, but I decided to add some more overall thoughts at the end. And in our Critical Friends network, you can provide those as well. So some of the stuff is more fundamental than a comment I would make in the middle of a proposal. And so if you want to include that in an email to the poster or the writer, if you want to, you can keep the track changes and just tag it as your own writing at the end as a comment stuck on there. It doesn't have to be in the little comment box. But if you have overall thoughts, it's good to provide those as well. So that's a little example of how the process can work. Yours may take a very different form, but that's how I typically do a review of a grant proposal. I look for those aspects that are typos, look for those aspects that are readability and clarity, and try to do as much as I can with the science, because that's really, science wins over typos all day. And but if we can improve all of it and remove any opportunity for reviewers or readers to catch something that takes them out of the science, then that's great. So we will be launching this as of now. Hopefully you very soon will be sending out an email to the college, and you can just reply to that to sign up. You will be added to the Microsoft Teams team and to the email list, so notifications go out both ways. We have a lot of people who couldn't be here today. We have an entire department that's having a department meeting right now. But please recruit your colleagues. Let them know, since you know now more about what this is, let them know that this is an opportunity available to them. And then you can start posting your writing. So if you're working on a manuscript or a proposal right now, this is a good opportunity once you get it into polished form to post it. The big overarching caveat is time. So like I said, you set your own deadline for receiving reviews, but the longer a deadline you can provide, the better chance you have of getting reviews and getting good reviews, being mindful of your colleagues' time and that they're as busy as you are. So if you have maybe it's a grant proposal deadline or a special topics issue for a deadline, or for a journal, or a publisher has given you a deadline for your book chapter, back up enough to include time for this process, and I promise you the outcome will be better. I've never written anything that I haven't submitted anything that I haven't felt really good about, and that has had errors and mistakes and things that I missed completely. So even though you may feel it's in completely polished form, you've looked at it 100,000 times, there's nothing more that can be done to it. There's more that can be done to it, and these external eyes are really helpful. But you can't work up to the very end of the deadline and have time for this review. So that's the quick run through of this process and how it will work in our college. Any questions from anyone? Okay, so we've recorded this. It will be posted on our standard site for our research events in the Wellstar College. So if your colleagues want to learn more, if you think this might be valuable for them, you can point them to the recording, which will be posted later today. And we archive all of our Research Wednesdays there. And thank you for tuning in. Remember, we have 2 of these in October. We're doubling up this month and 1 more in November, and then we'll have a new slate next semester. Susan.
So Mark, I don't necessarily have a question, but I do have a comment. First of all, I love this idea. I think it's really great. And I think that it is unfortunate that more people weren't on this call to get the enthusiasm that you portray. So I'm very glad you recorded it. I appreciated all the examples that you gave and, you know, the pointers. But I guess it is a question. I am not detail oriented at all. I mean, a little bit, not much though. And so I didn't notice the typo. I didn't even notice the comprised when you circled it. I'm like, is that really wrong? So, so my contribution to this is, you know, I'm more of an encourager. Like I would be that person more than the highly critical reviewer. Editing is not my gift. So what use is there for folks like us?
I think I'm really glad you brought that up, and I think that's the reason this is a network, and the reason we have hopefully, in an ideal world, multiple people reviewing each work, because being a detail-oriented reviewer, I will get hung up on the readability of a sentence and miss something like an entire point is really confusing here. You could see that as a more global reader who's not going to get hung up on comprised versus composed, but will move along and say, maybe this is a point that could be conveyed a little clearer earlier in the manuscript, or this is something that's a little confusing just to an outside reader, so maybe find a way to communicate it better. And those are both really valuable perspectives. And if we had about 50% of you and a scattering of the other types, I think we could do ourselves a big favor.
Sure. I would have commented on how cool that graph was that they put in, and wasn't that really well done? You didn't really bring that up, and I don't know if that would be appropriate, but I thought it really communicated well that very lengthy and I thought almost wordy explanation. If I looked at the graph, I could really see it, and I just thought that was really nicely done. I do have one more question, I guess. Sorry, I
Yeah.
know you were about to close up, but
No, it's fine.
the value of your expertise being already as part of a review team is great. And I never have had that opportunity. I tried one time and I didn't get it. So not all of us have that. So how do we improve upon our abilities? I mean, this workshop was helpful, but it might be, would it be helpful to have somebody work with somebody as seasoned as you are with the review teams?
That's a great idea. And Amanda DeLauria, you're welcome to chime in as well in what the research office does in this regard. But you get that experience from reviewing for journals, reviewing for funding agencies, sitting on study sections and doing this over and over again. You start to see patterns and you start to see things that are common errors that a lot of people might include. And you also see the perspective of others and you see what people critique that you might not have thought of, and that helps. So I think there's probably is some mentorship that can be done, but also your professional service is kind of a learning by doing. So
Sure.
Anything to add, Amanda?
I think you hit it nail on the head. Definitely, we encourage sitting on panels, sitting on review panels for your respective agencies, as well as we are hoping to eventually, when we have our apparatus set up, having maybe even some internal mock review panels for our R15s that come up, and would always be happy for people to review those. So yes, I think Mark, good answer.
Yeah. The reviewing of journals, I had that experience, and I think many of us had. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but I think being on section reviews for, NIH is not something really widely done, but maybe it is. And that, I guess that's where my comfort would be, to be mentored more.
Mm-hmm. And it's, I will add, it's not just NIH. So there are a lot of funding agencies and a lot of panels that need help. And boy, once the panel chair finds you, they will latch on to you. And if you do good work, they will invite you every single time. So it's just a matter of some of that networking and identifying opportunities. And I'm glad, Amanda, you mentioned the mock study sections. That's another model that is similar to this, but very specific toward research proposals. And it is great. It's typically folks who have served on panels and study sections before, and they will give you a preview of what's going to happen in the room. And it may be a little less friendly and a little more critical, because that's what we'll expect of the panels versus the network we're starting here. But that's sometimes good too. You just prepare yourself for it. And you mentioned one other thing I want to squeeze in. You mentioned reviewing for manuscripts and what good experience that gains. And it's a really good case in point. You get that letter back from the editor for a manuscript you've reviewed that says the decision. And if you're like me, I always go look at the other reviewers, because that's the time you get to see the other reviewers' comments. And you have that feeling of, was I way off? Did they agree with me? Did they catch things I didn't? Did I catch things they didn't? And invariably, I mean, there have been times where I have been way off, but I love to see the things we overlapped on and the things they caught and the things I caught. And that's part of what makes external perspective so valuable. We can't all catch it all, and that we see that displayed every time we get reviews from our manuscript submissions. Anything else? Kevin?
I just wanted to say I love this idea. I think it's great. I'm also going to be presenting in a couple weeks with Cheryl and Austin in the School of Data Science. So it's
Excellent.
good to hear kind of how this is all pulling together. And as far as methodological support, I will obviously try to provide some of that for some of these as they come through. I just love to hear this and kind of what's going on with that. And I also heard you mention the Qualtrics at the beginning. I did hear about that briefly, and it's good to hear a bit more about that. And as far as I guess that's a question I have for you and out there, if there's support where you want somebody to just kind of quickly go through a survey. That's something that I think a lot of times is forgotten about. It's put on a back burner. It's created and it said, hey, it looks good. And then one quick run through and it's the same kind of thing with these proposals where there's details that you just sometimes don't think about and you miss. So I don't know if they can include these materials inside with a link to their Qualtrics or however they so choose. Just kind of some other things to think about there.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to your presentation next time with your colleagues. I think you're exactly right. Even, this model is about the writing that we are actually submitting out into the world, but from the front end as well, when we're setting up our research design, when we're choosing survey instruments, if we can work with your group to make sure we're getting those right, that's a tremendous resource. So maybe as we work on the next session, we'll include some of that as well. All right, well, thanks for your attention and for good discussion afterwards, and we will draw this to a close and look for the email that is launching this actual process coming soon. And everybody have a great Wednesday.